Hi everybody, we are back for the Collin Griffith Day 4 murder trial. They had a little bit of paperwork they had to do before they would actually bring the jury in. So I didn't have us sit through all of that, but they did get the first person in to take the stand, so that's where we're going to start, the very first thing. I have it teed up, so let me put myself in the corner and we'll begin. And then if you're going to watch the Monica Cementelli trial with me later, that will be on in about 3.5 hours. So I'm going to be multitasking like crazy. Okay.
Ms. Detman, will you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell both your first and last name?
Susan Detman. Susan is S-U-S-A-N, and Detman is D-E-T-H-M-A-N.
Ms. Detman, how are you related to Collin Griffith?
I'm his maternal grandmother.
So your daughter was Kathy Griffin?
Yes, ma'am.
Griffith, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So give the jury a little bit of an idea of who the other members of your family are. Who was Kathy's father?
Robert Volantis.
Were you married at some point to Robert Volantis?
Yes, we were married for 19 years.
When did you divorce?
We divorced in 1998.
After you divorced Robert Volantis, did you get remarried?
Yes, I did.
Who did you get remarried to?
Inaki Markovich.
Okay, and might need to spell that last name for the court report.
M-A-R-K-E-V-I-T-C-H.
Ms. Detman, who are your children from your marriage to Robert Volantis?
John Paul Volantis, Kathy Volantis Griffith, and Christy Volantis Rooney.
Did you list them in ascending order of age, youngest to oldest?
The youngest to oldest.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have another child?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
Kevin Markovich.
And that's from your marriage to Mr. Markovich?
Yes.
Now, Kathy, obviously Collin was Kathy's son. Did she have any other children?
Yes, she had an older son. He's still alive, Christopher Ray Griffith.
How old is he?
He is 24.
I want to ask you a few questions about Robert Volantis, your ex-husband. When you divorced in 1998, who got custody of your 3 children with him?
I did.
And since 1998, has Robert Volantis been a big part of your life?
No, except for the custody battles we went through.
What about, are you aware of his relationship with any of the 3 children that you had with him?
He didn't have a relationship once he was not granted custody of John Paul. He didn't want Kathy, considered Kathy to be damaged goods. He was only sued for John Paul.
Okay, but what was his relationship like with his children after the divorce?
He didn't have a relationship at all until Kathy divorced and she reached out to her dad.
When did Kathy divorce her husband and the father of Collin and Christopher?
2019, if I remember correctly. It was like December of 2019 when they filed. And I think it took a couple months for the divorce to actually take place.
Okay. Now, we saw pictures of Robert Willantis on a trip with Kathy. Tell the jury about that trip, what you know about it.
So Kathy wanted to meet the biological Robert's mother, the biological grandmother, because Kathy had many medical problems. So she asked me, she said, Dad said he'll take me to California to meet his mom. They lived in Anaheim. The mom lived in Anaheim, California, but you'll have to pay for it. And I said, okay. I said, just please try not to do anything too expensive. And I'll see what points I can use for the hotels. And fly over there. You guys don't need to rent a car. You can use your dad's car if it can make it to California. If not, then we'll get a rental car.
So, Ms. Stettman, did you in fact pay for Kathy to go on this trip with Robert Willantis?
Yes. I paid for all the food, all the hotels, Disneyland, all of that.
And when was that trip?
That was before she got Collin back.
So before 2023?
Yes.
After 2019, though?
And after COVID was over with.
Okay.
So I believe it was 2022.
Are you aware of any other trips like that that Robert took with his other two children?
No. He didn't really have communication with them.
All right. So I want to ask about Kathy's funeral or celebration of life. Did the family hold such a thing for Kathy?
Yes. We had a celebration of life right here at the funeral home in Lakeland.
Was she actually buried or was she cremated?
No, she was cremated. She had conveyed to me as well as to her sister and brothers that she never wanted to be put in the ground. She wanted to be cremated and later taken back to the ocean in Key Largo and her ashes be put at the Jesus statue that we have under the water in Key Largo.
Has that been done?
No, we're going to do that this summer.
Where are Kathy's ashes right now?
Right now they're at Christie's house.
Was Robert Willantis invited to the celebration of life?
No, he was not.
Why not?
Robert tends to be very disruptive. He has difficulty with truthful manners, and we just did not want to have more lies and disruption. The final time that we could say goodbye to Kathy.
I'm going to ask you some questions now that may also be difficult. In the last roughly 2 months before Kathy died, what personal medical things were you going through?
So in the last part of June, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I had to have part of my colon removed and an ostomy put in place.
After you were diagnosed and had your surgery, did you have a fight with Kathy over Robert Willantis?
Yes, I did. Kathy was very adamant that she wanted Robert to take care of me, that I needed to pay for his flight from New Mexico to Lakeland, get a hotel for him for 2 weeks, and get some sort of a car, and even pay for his food. And I told Kathy, I said, that's ridiculous. He hates me. I don't want to be hurt by him. Plus, has lost his nursing license. I want a real nurse that has...
Okay, hold on.
I'm going to just object to all this collateral accusations.
Ms. Stettman, as a result of you not wanting to follow Kathy's wishes as far as Robert Willantis coming here and taking care of you. Did that cause a break in communication between you and Kathy?
Yes, she refused to talk to me. She blocked my phone. She told me if I came over to the house, she would have me arrested for trespassing. She said, you can contact Collin, but you can't contact me.
And that, okay, I'll move on from this. Mr. Willantis on the stand mentioned that Kathy got Collin a second phone, and that must have been what Collin used to talk with Mr. Willantis on the phone every week or every other week. Tell the jury what you know about a second phone.
The second phone, I purchased a second phone when Collin came to live with me in the January-February time period, the first time she threw him out. And I couldn't leave a kid in the double wide by himself without a phone. Plus, since I didn't
Wait, hold on. Why didn't Collin have a phone with him when he went to live with you in January of 2024?
Because Collin and I were at the Mexican restaurant in Port Charlotte. Kathy and Collin and I were supposed to go. When I got there, Kathy said, no, I don't want to go. And I said, come on, at least have some nachos or something. No, I don't want to go. And I said, can I take Collin with me? Sure. So while we were at the Mexican restaurant, she called me and she said, don't bring Collin back. I never want to see you or Collin again.
And the phone that Collin had at that point, where was it?
It was at Kathy's house.
Okay, so you brought Collin to
the double wide in Arbondale, and I didn't even have internet because, of course, I wasn't there all the time. So if I needed to, I'd hotspot my computer. I didn't want an extra expense for internet or cable or any of that. And so I realized I couldn't leave Collin here without a phone. So I told him, I said, we're going to have to go to AT&T and get a phone for you. And I even got a 786 area code because that's the area code that I have in the keys.
And that second phone, did Collin have possession of it from January of 2024 all the way up until September of 2024?
No. He only had possession of it for that small amount of time from when he came to, which would have been, it was either the end of January or the beginning of February. He had possession of it there. And then when he left, he took it, and I immediately got it by that weekend.
Okay, I'm actually going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit number 16 and see if you recognize it.
So I was saying that it was her trailer that
See if you
Kathy was murdered
recognize
in.
those
And
messages
from what it looks
from
like, she
January
still has it and lives there.
Well, do you recognize those?
According to
No,
this, okay,
don't read
No.
it. Do you recognize those messages being
No.
between you and Kathy?
no.
Okay.
Do you remember there being a period in January of 2024 where where Collin was with you for several weeks and Kathy didn't remember that he had gone with you?
Yes.
And do you know what was going on with Kathy at that time?
She was suicidal, taking pills. She just didn't want to have her life. She was drinking
Okay.
excessively. She drank Everclear as her alcoholic choice.
Okay, Ms. Detman, just answer the questions, okay?
Yes.
You mentioned that she was suicidal in January. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 15.
See if you recognize the subject matter of those texts.
Yes.
Judge would like to admit defense exhibit number 15 into evidence.
Objection?
No objection, Judge.
Cannot receive.
Ms. Detman, defense exhibit 16, dated February 5th of 2024, and the blue text at the top was Kathy's number 941-258-0963,
Yes.
and were you the number below that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you mentioned the 786 number, but you had two phones, correct?
Yes.
Why did you have two phones?
I use one for work and one for personal.
So the blue message on top talks about Kathy just having been released from the ER for an accidental overdose. Was that one of the times that she had had a suicide attempt?
Yes.
So the phone that you bought for Collin in either January or February of 2024, and I'm sorry if you already answered this, but he didn't keep that after the brief period that he lived with you then, did he?
He went home with it and I had it back on the weekend.
Okay, so shortly after he went back home to Kathy.
Yes.
So Kathy, it sounds like off and on had estrangement from various family members.
Yes.
You mentioned that you and she didn't speak for quite some time after your cancer diagnosis. Had she cut other members of the family off at other times in her life?
Her and John Paul were not speaking.
Do you know why?
Yes. She got mad at his wife because the house wasn't clean to her standard. And she said, I'm going to call DHS, which in our state is Child Protective Services, that Isabella was not taken care of, that she was in danger, something. I know DHS ended coming up to John Molantes' house. Of course, the investigation proved that there wasn't a problem, and John just said, I will never have anything to do with her again. She crossed the line.
any other family estrangements from Kathy besides you and her brother John?
So Kevin and Kathy were supposed to go to Washington, D.C. together.
Kevin is your son with
Yes, and Kevin
Inaki.
and Kathy were pretty close. They were supposed to go to Washington, D.C. together because Kevin was in officer basic training in Virginia for the Florida National Guard. He just graduated from college, and he had time off during the 4th of July. And Kathy said, you know, it'd be great if Collin and I could meet up with John Paul in Washington, D.C.
Do you mean Kevin or?
Kevin, I'm sorry, Kevin would meet up. I was supposed to go because, of course, my cancer, I
Okay.
couldn't.
Miss Volantis, I'm sorry. I know you're nervous, but the estrangement,
Yes.
how that
So what
occurred.
happened is Kathy contacted Kevin and said, unless you help me get your father arrested, meaning Inaki Markovich, I don't want you coming to Washington, D.C. with me.
Do you know what Kathy was referring to as far as helping her get your husband arrested?
Yes, they had had an altercation in our farm in Arcadia during COVID, so it was during 2020, around Easter time. It was before Easter, and she threatened him with a baseball bat, and she said she was going to get her gun and shoot him. And my husband brought a shotgun out and said, I have a shotgun here. We're not going to be doing this. And later, she said that he used the shotgun, fired the shotgun. And I said, it was a double wide. I think I would know if a shotgun had been fired in the ceiling in a double wide.
Okay. So after that interaction between Kathy and Kevin, were they estranged from each other for a while? But it sounds like she would kind of change her mind about who she was close with or wanted to have communication with. Is that?
Yes, because she called Kevin the next day and said, I'm sorry, come on to Washington, D.C. with us. And Kevin said, I already told my cadre, my leave's been canceled.
Okay. Are you aware of threats that Kathy had made to commit suicide?
Yes.
How many are you aware of, if you know?
I'm aware of 5.
Okay.
No, 6.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 14. See if you recognize this.
Yes, I do.
I'd like to admit Defense Exhibit 14 into evidence, please.
Objection.
No objection, Judge.
Will be received.
What is this exhibit?
I wasn't sure, if Kathy showed that to me, I wasn't sure if it was blood or a magic marker because I didn't see it physically. She said that it had something to do with a song she was listening to, and she was upset because of the divorce.
And you can't quite see it now, but did you see a video of, so you can see the triangle for play. Had you seen the actual video of this?
Yes.
In it, can you see what's written on the left side of Kathy's arm?
I mean, you can't see it right now, but do you remember what it said?
I don't remember what it said because it was just so horrific that that she was doing this to herself.
I'm coming up here, so don't forget to give it to the clerk.
Have you actually called law enforcement on occasion when Kathy made suicidal statements to you?
Yes.
All right, so you said you know of about 6 threats. What about actual attempts by Kathy to kill herself? Or was that the 6 and I misunderstood?
Those were the 6 attempts.
Okay. Can you describe some of those for the jury?
Yes. So the first one was, well, she was still married and she was very upset and she had overdosed on her trazodone. And she told me, I was in Key Largo and she lived in Key Largo at the time. And I said, I'm going to have to take you in right now to emergency room. You're going to die. And she said, no, I'm not going in.
Ms. Detman, it's okay. You don't have to give all of those
Okay, I'm
details.
sorry.
That's all right. I understand. So that was one attempt. What about other attempts that you were aware of?
So the second attempt was when she was in Port Charlotte. I had to go over the fence and open the sliding glass door, and she was in her bed, all dressed in black, and with a revolver in her hand.
And had she done anything with any medications that
Yes, she
time?
had overdosed on the oxycodone.
Did she end up going to the hospital that time?
Yes.
Any other attempts that you remember?
Yes. There was another attempt with oxycodone again about 4 months later. Then there was an attempt with medication and Everclear. The second attempt, she went back to the emergency room and was admitted, vapor active. The third time, when I called Port Charlotte Police, they got there and said, she appears fine to me. If she wants to drink in her own house, that there's nothing we can do. And then the most recent time was just in August of this year, August 21st. She called me and said she had overdosed on metoprolol, her heart and blood pressure medication, because the other ones didn't work. So she said, I did that, and I said, have Collin take you to the ER. No, I don't want to go. Have Collin take you. Finally, I talked Collin into taking her to the emergency room.
So, to your knowledge, Collin was home when she overdosed and actually had to drive her to the
Yes.
emergency room
Yes.
in August of 2024.
Yes.
You mentioned that Kathy had been Baker acted. Was that more than one time?
Yes.
The jury has heard a lot about some things that Kathy claimed that were maybe not true. How would you describe Kathy's reliability or her reputation for truthfulness?
Objection, Your Honor.
Judge, can we go sidebar?
I have so many notes for the next break. This is not going down how I thought it would when she would take the stand. Hearing all the different stories and like the little details leading up to this trial, I was anticipating something very different from this grandma. And I mean, I was wrong on so many things, so we'll go through it all during the break, but very interesting. And I also thought that the mom was more put together than what people were saying she was. I actually was concerned that maybe the grandma was spoiling Collin and wanted him with her, so she was maybe deceiving people. But no, it sounds like Catherine was pretty messed up. I'll save the rest for the break, though. I don't think she's looked over at Collin even once. I mean, she's basically been looking down the whole time, but when she has looked up, I think she looked at the jury a couple times, but she has not looked the other way at Collin. And now I get the impression that she maybe didn't really want a relationship with either one of them. It sounds like it was a lot and too much for her to handle and just chaos all the time. They were talking about her funeral. The last 24 hours, I have been looking for her obituary, and I was trying to find a funeral home because I wanted to read what was said on it. Because sometimes, you know, when a parent passes, they'll then talk about like who they left behind, so their kids that are still alive or grandkids. And I was curious to know if they had made that and if they put Collin on it. I mean, since he was the one who killed her, allegedly, but I don't see how she could have stabbed herself through the neck. Whatever, we'll get into that later. But I was curious, and I can't find anything. So when this started, they actually did say she had the funeral in, well, it was more of a celebration of life, not a funeral, but in Lakeland Funeral Home. So I'll be doing some research to see if I can find that. And then she was also asked if they had already gone and scattered her ashes. But, you know, really think about it. You know, it just turned February. This happened just in September. And she had to have autopsies and all this stuff. So it's been pretty new. Not one of these trials where it's 3 years later and here they are. Moving very fast. Let's see if we can move forward a little bit since I skipped the lawyers talking this morning. Yeah, we have some space.
Up Inaki for charges of attempted murder and assault against you, meaning she's claiming that Inaki actually tried to murder you, correct?
Yes.
Is that true?
No, he's never tried to murder me.
So that's something that Kathy threatened and claimed that just simply wasn't true, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Has she done that on other occasions, make things up?
Yes. Yes. She made up that I was diagnosed with Lynch disease, which is it's an auto-recessive disorder where people have to have, they're more prone to cancer. So she said that her insurance company was forcing her to have a hysterectomy because of that. she also told Christy, and Christy was so distraught.
Okay, Ms. Stepman, I'm
sorry.
sorry. No, it's okay. I understand. So she made up that you had a disease that you do not in fact have.
No, I verified with my oncologist that I didn't have.
She also made up that John Paul Volantis had been neglecting his child, right?
Yes,
Has she ever made anything up about Robert Volantis?
yes.
What did she make up about Robert Volantis?
When she was younger, she said that Robert raped her.
And how do you know that that's not true?
It went to court,
Okay.
so I don't know. I only...
Did she ever tell you that she had made it up?
Oh, yes. Later, as an adult, she told me she had made that up.
Did she say why she made it up?
Yes, because she was mad at the situation between Robert and I.
Okay. Has she ever made anything up about her being responsible for everybody else's successes in the family?
Yes, she went as far to say that no one in the family would have any of their degrees, and that she, in fact, the only reason that I got my doctorate was because of her.
Okay. And did she actually make a threat to you regarding this
Yes,
belief
she
she
did.
had?
She said she was going to, when she was mad at me one time, she said she was going to contact the university where I work at, and I said, go right ahead. No, I had to.
What did she tell you she was going to
She said
say
she was
to
going
them?
to call the university, my dean, and tell him that she did all of my coursework and that I didn't do anything and that I was a phony.
Did she make up at any time that you're aware of that Collin was failing school?
Yes, she said that he had been failing school, and that when he was staying at my house, that it was my fault because I wasn't observing him on the computer to make sure he was doing his work.
Was Collin ever failing to your knowledge?
No,
When did Collin graduate from high school?
he graduated last June.
Was that actually ahead of schedule?
Yes, that was a year ahead of schedule.
And did he, in addition to graduating early, did he ever, did he get college credit?
Yes,
At the same time.
He was dually enrolled in college.
You mentioned earlier that you had paid for some trips, the trip for Kathy to go visit Robert Volantis and meet his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pay for other trips for Kathy?
Yes, the cruises that they went on, I paid for.
And the other trips that the jury has seen pictures of Kathy and Collin, who paid for all of those trips?
I did.
Did you also have, you mentioned points and using points for things.
That's our DVC, our Disney Vacation Club, as well as I have points through Hilton Honors.
Have you ever witnessed Kathy not being able to control her temper?
Yes.
Can you describe some of those
Yes.
times?
She went at.
Your Honor, if we may approach for a moment. Another sidebar. The headset that Mr. Griffith is using is on mute somehow. I can't figure out how to unmute it. It doesn't appear to have any buttons on it at all, but I I may not just know how it works.
We're certain that it's plugged in.
It indicates that it's on mute. It has like a little, that's the one I've been using.
Okay, so we know that Catherine has ADHD. There was nothing else that she was prescribed, no medications or anything like that. I kind of got the vibe of bipolar based on how her relationships were going. Seems like she would lash out, and then a couple hours later, she'd be like, everything's fine, let's go, let's hang out. And then the grandma said something interesting. I was trying to look and see if Collin was on any medications, because Collin and his mom were both Baker acted many times. So they had to go and be put away in a mental facility. They usually can hold people up to 3 days against their will. And that happened to both of them. But no, Collin is not on any medication either. And the grandma said, I don't know if he necessarily has anger issues, but I 100% think that he should be on medication. So there's definitely something off with him. Definitely something off with Catherine. It has to be more than ADHD. But then it's really crazy hearing the fact that even as a young adult, and maybe even teenage years, she was making up these elaborate stories that were horrible to ruin people's lives because she was mad. It's insane. I'm going to censor myself because I don't want to get flagged on YouTube, but they just talked about the fact that she claimed a guy had R'd her, and then they went to court and they found that wasn't true. And years later, she told her mom, oh yeah, that didn't really happen. I was just mad. That is not normal. And this is not like an ADHD symptom or thing. That is not normal. I think she really, at some point, was disconnecting from reality. I don't know if something traumatic happened when she was younger or a teen, but not good. Not good at all. And it sounds like Collin was dealing with major issues as well. But then both of them combined, yeah, she was saying how the grandma had to call the cops on them. When was this? This was November of 2003. Yeah, because they both were gearing up to physically fight each other. And the grandma was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So they had the cops come, and then they got in trouble with the cops. But it's like, you are the mom. She died when she was 38 or 39. She has an older son. She has obviously the younger son, Collin, and she was not doing a good job of pulling herself together and becoming a stable adult. And I think it just probably made Collin grow up having erratic behavior too. And it sounds like it was very toxic with both of them. Something interesting I thought was said though, so there's been the whole debate over, was he defending himself against his dad when he killed his dad? And it was said that Collin knew that his dad had physically assaulted her, and basically it was just like scarring to her. And I think there's a chance.
Members of the jury, I'm going to ask that you step into the jury room for just a few moments and discuss the matter with the lawyers.
So maybe that's why she never took it.
All rise, please.
They're going on break. So that could be why she never told the police. And for this trial, it's going to be coming out. There's text messages between her and Collin discussing that. And Collin's defense team fought to keep this all out of the trial, and they lost. So whatever it's going to be is going to be very interesting. But the mom believed it was intentional, but evidently the mom didn't like the dad and felt that he was a bad guy who physically hurt her. That makes a little bit more sense now. All right, since we started later because I didn't want to listen to the attorneys talk before the jury came in, we should be able to move forward some. Let me see. Oh, is there sound off for this?
That will be contrary to what Your Honor just read in the jury instructions, Your Honor. It might be I don't know, it might be a question by question journey to see what, if anything, is admissible or relevant based upon the application of the question asked by Ms. Thornhill, the jury instruction differentiating between, as Your Honor pointed out, the reputation or things that the defendant has to have been present for, have personal knowledge of, and Ms. Detman, depending on how narrow, or maybe I should say how wide her answers are going to be.
As far as her reputation, it's my understanding that her reputation within the family was for being dangerous and violent, and people were scared of what she might do at any given moment. So I was going to ask about both.
All right. While I understand the community, for purposes of this type of reputation evidence, may be narrower, you're still going to need to lay that predicate.
Sure.
This is a family of estrangement, after all, it seems. So
Because of her violence.
Well,
yeah.
but I don't know who's estranged from who else. So
Well, and it.
She needs to understand and know that family community.
Okay.
So.
And even if somebody's not still a part of that community on this particular day, I mean, they don't.
I'm not suggesting it has to be at some
Okay.
particular instant in time, but I haven't heard a lot about her closeness with others who may share that in that reputation or have knowledge of that reputation.
Okay. I will do my best. Is
And
this
we'll
our-
just take it question by question, as Mr. Levine suggests.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and just take our mid-morning recess?
That's what I was going to ask, if I could run the question.
Mr. Levine?
Yeah, that's fine, Judge.
All right, we'll take 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to move it forward in just a second. But, obviously the defense attorney is going to put all the blame onto Catherine, saying that she was one who would physically attack people. But really, both could be true. They both could have been physically aggressive. She's not going to say that because it's her client. But I think we'll find out more and more what his temperament was. The grandma has already said that he is quick to get in a fight and has a hard time calming down in that way, especially with his mom. So both could be true. They both could be erratic and physically aggressive. I also want to know what the grandma and her husband have done for a living or did, because if they have a place in Key West, Florida, super expensive. They talked about how they paid for their vacations, Catherine, on the cruises. But they also brought up DVC. And if you're not familiar with this, it's the Disney Vacation Club. That is so much money. Like, you all of that stuff. It's outrageous. So I am very curious. I'll be looking at that.
That's the only one that
I don't know what this one is.
the court reporter does. I just can't imagine it was never.
Let me see if they're coming back in or not. Just leaving the audio running. Okay. Yeah, so Disney Vacation Club. Right now, if you wanted to buy into that, you have to give something like $60,000 just to say you're a member. And then you have to pay like, what, $15,000 a month to keep it. It's ridiculous. Don't ever do it. If you ever want to do it, don't do it. Buy the annual passes, do something like that. Not that. It's a ripoff. But she said that she would even have them go on Disney cruises. Those are really expensive too. So I will be sleuthing the internet to see what this mom did for her profession and her husband. But, I mean, good for them, That's great for them. But I am very curious now. Let's see what some of the chat's been saying. Here, let me see. Am I louder now? I turned it up a little bit. I don't want to be screaming into your ears. You think you maybe heard of this when this happened last September? I'm trying to remember if I briefly heard something. I also thought Catherine was a teacher. Like, that's everything I saw online, was that she was a high school teacher. But hearing all of this, I don't see how she could have been a teacher. I mean, just drugs and drinking heavily every day. You can't go teach kids.
State counsel is present. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I was looking last night to see if there was any high school friends or acquaintances that maybe spoke out about Collin. Nobody. So I've been kind of waiting. I'm like, maybe somebody else will give more insight that's not a part of this family, because clearly there's bad dynamics with a whole bunch of them. And I think he's intentionally sitting where he's at every single day. He's blocked, which, I mean, it is what it is. Yesterday, when we were watching and catching up, he had moved forward a little bit, but then he immediately went back. So he'll probably be like this for the rest of the trial. And I don't think he's going to take the stand. I'd be shocked. I'm assuming they're waiting for jury to come back in.
All rise, please.
Yeah.
Please be seated.
Ms. Detman, I'm going to ask you about some specific instances and may ask you to describe a little bit about them. So starting with, are you aware of Kathy having pinned her then husband to the wall of the house with her running car?
Yes, ma'am, I know.
Okay. And were you present for that?
No.
Have you ever, are you aware if Collin was aware of that incident?
Yes.
He was aware.
Yes.
What about an incident where Kathy stabbed her then husband with a corkscrew and then burned him with a terrarium light? Are you aware of that incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you aware that Collin was present for that incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of Kathy threatening to kill her then ex-husband's girlfriend's family in Homestead?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware that she actually started driving toward their house to follow through on her plan?
Yes.
Did you actually speak with her on the phone then?
Yes. I was telling her that what she was doing was crazy. She was going to get in trouble, that she couldn't take it out on 3 innocent lives in Homestead. She needed to turn around and go back home.
Are you aware if Collin was aware of that incident?
I'm not aware.
The incident where you said Kathy attacked your husband with a baseball bat.
Yes.
Are you aware if Collin was aware of that incident?
I'm not aware of that.
And have you ever personally witnessed Kathy engage in a physical act of violence towards Collin?
I know that there was a fight at the house in Port Charlotte, and the fight started because she was beating him with a belt and making him do push-ups, sit-ups, push-ups, and then holding a weight above his head while he was running in place.
Okay. When you say that she beat him with a belt, were you actually there for
Yes,
that?
I was, and I tried to stop it.
Right. What about, are you aware that Kathy pulled a gun on Collin?
Yes, and then later she said that originally she denied it, then she said yes. She pulled out the gun and handed it to Collin and said, just kill me, shoot me.
So she actually admitted that to
Yes.
you.
Yes,
And obviously Collin was aware of that because he was the one who was present with her.
yes, and Corporal Rendas was aware of that also.
How was Corporal Rentis aware of this?
Because he and I and Kathy were talking about that. There's a difference when you take a gun out and give it to somebody and say, here, kill me with this, versus somebody pulling a gun out and putting it to their head or to their chest.
And so Corporal Rentis was a part of this conversation where Kathy admitted she pulled a gun,
Yes.
and she said she handed it to Collin.
Yes.
Did she ever admit that she actually threatened to kill Collin with it?
No, she never did.
Within your family, you've talked about some of the family members. Despite some of the estrangements that Kathy had, would the family sort of maybe not talk to her for a while and then everybody would come back together, take trips together? I mean,
I was the constant in her life. My oldest daughter didn't talk with her while she was married.
okay, what I'm asking about is, did the family talk about Kathy with each other?
Yes.
Okay. And whether or not Kathy was estranged from anyone at any one particular moment, did the family continue to have discussions about Kathy?
Yes.
And was there, did Kathy have a reputation within your family as being violent?
Yes.
Did she have a reputation as being unpredictable
Yes.
and volatile?
Yes.
Despite all of this, did you still love Kathy?
Yes, very much, very much. I always wanted to help her.
It appears that Kathy at times wanted Collin with her at all costs, and then at other times wanted nothing to do with him.
Yes, when she had Collin back for about a month, she spoke with me and she said, Mom, I have to get up every morning at 6 o'clock, take him to school, and then I have to go back and pick him up. And I said, you don't have to, let him ride the bus.
Okay.
Welcome to being
I'm going
a
to show you
parent.
what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 26 for identification.
Sorry, what number is that?
26. Will you read this and see if you recognize it as a text from Kathy?
Yes.
I'd ask that Defense Exhibit number 26 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received.
In this particular text, is Kathy saying she's done with this, and she can't take Collin to school anymore?
Yes.
So that was a specific example of what you just described to the jury.
Yes.
As part of this vacillating back and forth that Kathy seemed to have about whether she wanted to have Collin live with her or didn't want Collin to live with her, did you all agree eventually to a concurrent custody plan?
Yes, we did.
And that was something, did anybody force Kathy to sign those papers?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Were there times when Kathy wanted to cancel the 751 plan, the concurrent custody plan?
Yes.
And then would she change her mind back?
Yes.
Okay, so it's safe to say she wasn't consistent.
She was not consistent.
Obviously, Kathy owned a gun, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, at some point, did Kathy give her gun to you to have it out of the home in Port Charlotte?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
Yes, it was it's right after the incident where Officer Rentis and Lacey got involved when Collin came back to the home. So that must have been somewhere in the October time frame of 2023.
Okay. How long did you have the gun at your home and away from Kathy and Collin's house in Port Charlotte?
Less than a week.
Okay. Why did you have it for less than a week?
Because she demanded that I give it back. She said, "It's my gun, you can't have it." And I said, "But we discussed with Officer Rentis and Lacey that I would keep it." "No, it's my gun, you can't have it. And how do I know Nikki won't use it to kill you?"
Okay. So Kathy got the gun back, and
Yes.
so far as you know, she had it with her.
She had told me that she had given it to her next door neighbor Melanie for safekeeping, and then a couple months later she said, "No, Mom, I lied to you. I've had it all along."
Okay. Finally, you had a lot of communication with Kathy on September 7th and September 8th,
Yes.
right? You also had communication with Collin during that time. Did you allow Collin to go to your house in Auburndale when Kathy kicked him out?
Yes,
And why did you allow that?
because a child can't be just roaming around the street by himself. Colin told me he didn't have gas in his car. You know, he had like half a tank, that was it. He didn't have his phone. He was using his computer somehow to talk with me. I told him, I said, you have to get to Auburndale before dark because otherwise the gates will be closed. During the day, the gates are open. And go in through the back sliding glass door because you know there's no lock on the back sliding glass door. And I will be there Sunday. Don't talk to anybody and don't leave the house.
At some point, obviously, Kathy, as the jury's heard on some videos, was trying to find out if Collin was actually at your house.
Yes.
When did she finally discover that he was at your house?
I let her know around 11 that night.
On the 7th, so
Yes.
Saturday the 7th.
Mhm.
And how did she react?
She said, you lied to me. And I said, I told you I didn't know if Collin was there. I said, because I don't want you going over there and grabbing him. You just threw him out. Give him some time, give you some time. Let's not have a huge problem associated with this.
And aside from conversations that the jury has heard between you and Kathy over the next hours, did you specifically tell Kathy not to go to your house in Auburndale?
Yes. I said, I will be going Sunday morning. I left first thing Sunday morning. I was going to leave right then, but I was so tired and I have difficulty seeing in the dark that I thought, no, it's better that I wait. You know, in hindsight, I should have gone. But, so I waited, I talked to her, she said, no, Mom, I'm going. And that's when she said, I've sold the car, they're gonna come by and pick it up. I said, you can't sell Collin's car, it's his car. No, I don't care, I'm selling it. I'm turning it into his probation officer for not, because he's not allowed to leave the county, which when I talked to the probation officer, I found out that Kathy had told them that I had terminal cancer, so therefore Collin could come and visit me anytime I want. I had to tell the probation officer, well, right now I'm only at stage 3, so no, you know, and I'm only in observation, so I'm not terminal.
Okay.
So,
But you personally told Kathy, do not go to Auburndale.
yes, I told her, I said, when I get back, I will give him gas money and I will follow him there, or we can wait until Monday morning. Let's just wait. Don't go there. You don't have permission to go.
Why did you not want her to go to your house in Auburndale?
Because I didn't want her to start a fight with Collin. I was afraid that she would be combative, maybe go after him with a baseball bat, a gun, something.
I don't have any other questions, I don't think.
Thank you.
I don't have any other questions, but Mr. Levine does.
Mr. Levine?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Dedman.
Good morning, sir.
Ms. Dedman, I know you're going through a lot with the loss of your daughter and cancer and everything else, but I'm going to need to ask you some questions if that's all right with you.
Yes, sir.
Now, today here in court in front of the jury, you've talked about that you were concerned that Kathy was going to attack your grandson, and then you listed a bunch of different weapons. But weren't you more concerned that your grandson, who had killed someone before and had been violent countless times with your daughter, weren't you concerned that he was the one that was going to attack your daughter?
No. He had not been violent countless times with Kathy. Kathy had been violent with him countless times.
Now, a lot of the things you've said here today, you never bothered to tell me or law enforcement or anyone.
Objection, Judge, it's improper impeachment.
Ms. Detman, as it pertains to your grandson, do you talk to him a lot on the phone since he's been in jail?
Yes.
Okay. Do you do any emailing with him?
I don't email with him while he's in jail.
You-
No.
you
Just
prefer
talking
to-
on the phone.
Talk with him? All right.
Yes.
And how many times a week would you say that you talk to your grandson on the
I
phone?
usually talk to him 3 times. I encourage him to pray. I ask him if he's eating. I mean, I'm a dietitian, that's what I do. That he's drinking his milk, that he's exercising in his cell, and most important, that he's reading books. And I keep telling him, you have got to pray. You have got to read your Bible.
Now, I mean, this is an obvious question, but you love your grandson, correct?
Yes,
Your daughter is dead, clearly,
yes.
and she's not coming back, correct?
No,
Now, would you agree that you don't want to see the defendant have to go to prison for a very long time? Is that correct?
I don't want to see my grandson go to prison for something he didn't do.
All right. Well, you couldn't make it any more crystal clear that you're up there and all your answers that you've given have been driven by you believing that the defendant, your grandson, didn't murder your daughter, correct?
I am giving clear answers, sir, as to what happened. I know my daughter. That's why I didn't want her coming that day to the house without me being there. I wanted her to wait the next day so that maybe she could calm down a little bit.
You know your grandson too, correct?
Yes,
And you know his history, correct?
yes.
Now, you say you know what happened, but you weren't there when it happened.
No, I'm not saying that I know what happened. I know the possibility of what could have happened. I wasn't there, so I have no way of knowing. I just know the facts about Kathy, having lived with her and worked with her, even to try to maintain her sanity, to try to maintain that she could keep her job as a teacher, to try to maintain that she wasn't trying to slice herself and kill herself,
Okay,
and
let's-
not coming after my husband with a gun.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Kathy. Now, it sounded like she had some mental problems. Is that correct?
Yes,
Now, you would probably agree that it didn't help that she got impregnated when she was just a child, correct?
she was 13. She got impregnated when she ran away from the Hope House, and they found her in the hotel with her boyfriend. It didn't help that her father called her F bitches and that she was damaged goods, and he didn't want anything to do with her.
Ma'am, it sounds like you're really quick to try to throw dirt on your dead daughter. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all. My dead daughter did the best that she could. We have a problem in this country with addressing mental health. We all know that. And that's what she had. She had mental health issues. At times, she was the greatest person on the world. Very
All right.
intelligent.
I appreciate that, ma'am. I appreciate that. Now, your daughter worked as a teacher for many, many years, correct?
Yes, she did.
And her students loved her, correct?
Yes, they did. For the most part. I mean, as with any teachers, you're going to have some students that, I mean, I'm an educator myself. You're going to have some students that don't. For the most part, yes.
And she cared about her students, correct?
Yes, she did.
She had a passion and a love for teaching.
Yes, she did.
And she taught, predominantly she taught English, correct?
Yes.
And she cared so much about her students that at a certain point, she let one of her students move in when she was married to her ex-husband, Chuck, correct?
Yes.
And then, unfortunately for your daughter, Chuck took advantage of this underage student, is what is believed to have happened, correct? And
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of all this.
Approach.
Yeah, going into this trial, I had so many notes on the fact that I thought the grandma just wanted to keep Collin to herself, wanted the mom to, go away, and that maybe she was spoiling Collin, and maybe they were just making up things about Catherine. But hearing this stuff, it's not quite as black and white as that. It sounds like she had major issues. So they're talking about the fact that Catherine had a gun. And then we're talking about all these different, incidences and the Baker Act. And right when they said that, I'm like, wait a second. You can't own a gun if you're there. There's rules in the U.S. that you have to, have no mental... if you have bipolar, you can't get a gun. You have to pass a whole exam and everything. And even if you have a gun... if things like that happen, you don't get to keep them. And you have to then go and take a test and have doctors clear you for you to ever get it back. They didn't do that for her. And she was Baker acted multiple times for who knows how many years. She should have never had a gun. And I don't understand. There had to be, they called the police a decent amount. You would think that any of them would have thought about that. And it's Florida. Florida has very strong rules on that. So I don't know how they let that go. And then here we are talking about the fact that she handed Collin the gun and told him to shoot her. And it's like, this whole thing should have never happened. She's already off the rails. Somebody needed to get the gun away. I mean, that's an easy grab weapon that she should never have had, because it sounds like she's had mental problems her whole life. Scary. I can't believe she was a teacher. That's what I saw. But I was like, well, maybe that can't be because she sounds like she is crazy. But no, evidently she was. And that is terrifying. Let me see if I wrote any other notes down. She said she was an educator. I said that I'm trying to look for what she did for a living and what her husband, I think it's her stepdad, so her husband did, because they evidently have a lot of money to spend, and I'm curious. I mean, either way, it's nice that they were paying for Catherine and Collin to take a vacation, to not be stressed out and have fun, and it wasn't all bad times. But man, these bad times were really bad. I don't understand how they let it go on this long. It was, to me, I look at it, I'm like, yeah, of course, one of them was going to die. But now we get to slowly start hearing about Collin and see if there's any other things that he's been doing. I feel like the grandma is pouring a lot of the blame on the mom, but she is also the mom. If she was like this his whole entire life, he's probably acting and reacting to things in a really destructive way because he learned it from his mom. So I'll be curious to see. I wonder if there will be any school counselors that step forward, or officers, or even physicians when he was Baker acted. So we'll see, but not a good situation at all.
Miss Dittman, I'm sorry we have to talk about some unpleasant things, but it'll be over soon enough.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. So, do you recall my last question?
Yes. You were asking me why I was spilling dirt on my dead daughter, and I said I'm not. I said I supported her. I've gone into massive debt in trying to ensure that she had.
I appreciate that, but that was a few questions.
Oh, you're talking about how Kathy ran away from the Hope House and they found her in the.
No, I'm not talking about that either. But if you listen to my questions,
she keeps rambling and getting in trouble for it.
So. We were talking about your daughter, that she was a very committed teacher and very committed to the youth of her classroom. And I mentioned that at a certain point, she even allowed one of her students to move into the household, and it was believed that Chuck had an inappropriate relationship with this student. Are you aware of that? With a yes or no answer, if we can start at that place, I'd appreciate it. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And you were not a big fan of Chuck as it ended up being the divorce, correct? For how he treated her, from how he impregnated her as a child through the years, being physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive to your daughter. I can't imagine you were a fan of that, were you?
No, Robert was the one that was a fan of Chuck.
Now, ma'am, I understand that you hate your ex-husband.
I don't hate him.
Well, it sounds like you're throwing stuff about Robert in a lot.
You just asked me if I was a fan, and I wanted to tell you who in the family was. I knew Chuck from the
Your
time
Honor.
he was.
Ms. Detman,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's the point.
Oh.
He gets to ask the
I'm
questions
sorry.
to elicit the information he's looking for. If additional information is needed, Ms. Thornhill or Mr. Henry will make sure to address it. So just pay close attention to the question that's asked and try to answer just the question that's asked.
I apologize.
It's all right. Mr. Levine?
Appreciate it. Ms. Stetman, as it pertains to your last piece of information that you provided, as it pertains to your husband, he hated Chuck for what Chuck did to his daughter, that being impregnating a little girl, correct?
I'm going to object to the relevance of and to speculation about what Robert thought about Chuck.
Sustained as to relevance.
All right, Ms. Detman, if I ask you a question that, for your information, just please answer it, irrespective of your feelings about your ex-husband, all right? Now, at a certain point, Kathy got divorced from Chuck, correct?
Yes, sir.
After years of unthinkable abuse, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's move on to a different subject matter. When your grandson lived in Oklahoma with his dad for about 3 years or so, at the end of that, your grandson wanted to come live with Kathy and actually was able to, correct?
Yes.
And Kathy was very happy about that, correct?
Yes.
And she felt that she had missed out, understandably so, on multiple years of her son's life, correct?
Yes.
And she was trying to fix or make your grandson's life better.
She was trying to improve his lifestyle, yes.
That was the first positive thing
Now-
she said.
You mentioned
About Kathy.
you described it as a fight in Port Charlotte where law enforcement came because you said your daughter was beating Collin with a belt and made him do sit-ups and push-ups. You remember that?
I did push-ups, and I took away the sit-ups. It was push-ups and putting the weights above his head and running in place.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Now, you remember talking to law enforcement when they came out there, correct?
Yes.
And giving a sworn statement because you just wanted both parties, your grandson and your daughter, you wanted everybody to be safe and healthy and happy, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Detman, as to the root of what the issue was that night, do you remember telling the deputy that the three of you were at the dining room table and Susan had Collin seated down and Kathy told Collin that she would be implementing new parenting rules and Collin would be having his Xbox, his cell phone, and other items taken away as disciplinary action due to him being disrespectful to her? Do you recall telling law enforcement that?
I remember telling law enforcement about the Xbox would be, I don't know if it was taken away, but it was going to be restricted.
And at that time, your grandson didn't want to hear from his mom, and so he stood up and threatened to fight her and said, let's just do it, correct?
That was after the incident with the exercising and belt, the beating of the belt. That's when Kathy wanted us to all sit down and eat sandwiches. Like it literally went from one extreme to another. Sit down and eat sandwiches, and then Collin got up from the table and said, "Let's just do it." And I went to go get my phone to contact Officer Rentis or Corporal Rentis or Officer Lacey.
Okay, all right, very good. Now, you mentioned that you and your family members love to talk about how violent Kathy was. Is that right?
No, we didn't love to talk about how violent Kathy was. We talked about what we could do to help her. We didn't want her to lose her job. We didn't want her to be suicidal. And more than anything, we wanted her to try to get better.
Did you talk about how violent your grandson was?
No.
And why not? Weren't you concerned about that?
Objections.
Sustained.
Now, you were concerned about where the defendant would live, correct? In terms of who he might hurt, whether he lived with you and your husband, Nikki, or if he lived with Kathy.
My husband did not want Collin to live with us because he said that if Collin lived with us, Kathy would be over at the house and he didn't want to have to deal with Kathy.
Ma'am, didn't Nikki say he didn't want Kathy, he didn't want Collin to live with them because he was afraid that Collin might kill you or kill him?
No.
All right, now let's move on to the subject matter of kitchen knives or butcher knives. Do you tell the jury about the time when you noticed that there was a knife missing from your residence there in Auburndale, and you were trying to figure out who stole the knife or who took the knife?
Yes, there was a small knife with a blade like this that I bought in the dollar store, which is now like the $1.29 store, and it had a protective cover on it, and it wasn't in the drawer with the rest of the knives and silverware.
And did you find out eventually that your grandson had taken the knife?
Yes.
And he basically told you he just needed it just in case, and did not elaborate on what he was going to do with it?
He said he just needed it.
Now, at that time also, Kathy made it explicitly clear to you that she was afraid that the defendant might hurt her, correct?
Not at that time, it was later.
And there was multiple times when Kathy let you know that she was afraid for your safety and for her own safety.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that a couple of things about the 7th and the 8th of September. You mentioned that Collin told you that he didn't have a phone with him on the 7th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that he did have his cell phone with him and it was in his car?
So his cell phone had been turned off by his mother. She used to do that anytime she'd kick him out. She'd turn the cell phone off. In fact, it's in the records that she turned it off, and she turned it on, and she turned it off.
And you mentioned that the sliding door, that it had no lock on. Is that correct?
We had adapted the sliding door for a doggy door so Freddie could go in and out when he was staying in Auburndale on Acid Hound. And so it did not have a locking mechanism. You could close the door, but you couldn't lock it.
And so that's how you mentioned that your grandson was able to get into your house on the 7th?
Mm-hmm. Oh, plus the front door was. I don't believe in locks. I've been burglarized, and the burglars got in quicker than I could find my lock. I don't lock things.
Okay. Now your response when this was going on, when law enforcement made contact with you, was that you didn't know that Collin was a psychopathic killer. correct?
I never said that. Never.
If I may approach, please, Your Honor.
Amen.
Thought it was pretty entertaining that she said she doesn't believe in locking the door, considering she lives in Florida. If you're from the U.S., you know Florida has a lot of crazy crime that goes on. I would never leave my door unlocked there, ever.
Okay.
I wanted you to see what he's
Thank you.
referring to before you approach.
Ma'am, if you could just take your time and read the highlighted portion to yourself.
For one thing, I don't use words like stupid, Colin. I would never say that.
Oh,
He
ma'am.
just wants you to
Oh,
read it to
okay.
yourself.
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's all right.
That's the second time she's done that.
We may need to go sidebar real quick.
Have you finished reading it?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Approach sidebar, please.
Yeah, so I get the vibe from her that she really wants the whole courtroom to know exactly what she thinks about every situation and exactly what she thinks about Catherine. I don't think she focuses a lot of time and attention on Colin, and I think that might be definitely shifting the blame to only being on Catherine, which once again, like, she was an adult, she was his mom, she has a huge stake in the blame. But like I said, we'll see if anybody else is going to be coming taking the witness stand that can shed more light onto some of the things that Colin has done that is erratic and bad, because it seems like the grandma's not going to offer that up. If you missed any of our catch up with this trial, the grandpa actually took the stand and testified that Colin said that he wanted to kill her. He wanted to cut her open. He wanted to touch the blood and feel her die. Evidently, other people came forward too, saying he was saying that about his mom. So, very disturbing, very scary. At least some people are saying these things. Like I said, I don't know if the grandma is going to offer any part of that up, or if she's just going to be like, oh, I don't know, if they bring it up. I'm surprised, because that's a big deal. And also the fact that he had killed his dad, supposedly self-defense, but that was a year from when then he killed his mom. It was only a year apart, and he was making all these threats leading up to September. Not a good situation. I'm on my other computer seeing if there's other details that have come out that I can share with you guys. I looked up the funeral home for the celebration of life that they said she had. Nothing online about it. So we probably won't get to see what her obituary said. Like I said, I was just curious to know if the family actually wrote in survived by Chris, her older son, and Colin, her younger son. But maybe they didn't even do that. I mean, if they didn't do a funeral and it was just a celebration of life, maybe they didn't put it out in the paper and do an obituary or anything. Does anybody think that he's going to take the stand? I am a strong no, I don't think he will. But sometimes they surprise you, so maybe some of you think he will. Oh, I found something that's interesting, but it's a video, so I can't play it right now. But it's somebody who dated Catherine briefly, but got to meet Collin and evidently talked about that. So maybe I'll check it out later and see, once this trial is done for the day, if there's anything on it that we could watch together. We have an hour and a half to 2 hours till the Monica trial comes back on. I'll probably do what I did last week, and I'll be live on both my computers, one for the Monica, and then this one will stay on Collin. It's a little bit tricky doing it that way, but they will probably be going to lunch. Usually lunch is an hour, but they'll probably go to lunch when that trial's actually starting. So it might actually work out well, because then when they take their lunch, they'll be back. Let's just hope. For the Monica one, they keep changing the times, and I'm blaming it on California, because they're like, oh, we're going to take our lunch now. Lunch is always an hour. They keep coming back an hour and 45 minutes later. Or like, hey, we're going to have our 15-minute recess 40 minutes later. I was like, California, what are you doing? The rest of the country gets an hour, and all the short breaks are 15 minutes. No. So if you are watching that with me, do not listen to them. They can say 15 minutes, but who knows for real. Yeah, you don't think he'll risk the stand? I don't see him doing it. There might not even be a need to do it. But also, if he acts weird or suspicious or anything, he's just opening himself up to scrutiny by the jury. And if they think anything is weird about his interaction, they could find him guilty just for that. So the beauty in not having to take the stand if you don't want to. But yeah, I think that's the right call. I don't think he should. It will be wild though. So it's tricky. Even if she was doing all these horrible things, right? Seems like that is for sure she was. The whole defense says that she was the one who grabbed the knife and fell on it. Like, I would have, there would be more understanding if they were fighting each other. They had a horrible whatever. He was scared, protecting himself, and then that happened. But to say that she fell on the knife and it went through like this, it went out the other side, it's physically not possible. The doctor said it's not possible that it was her that did it. So I think that lie could make him get some sort of consequence, even if they don't put it on first degree murder. If they decide, well, hey, maybe he really was defending himself to some degree, but since he lied, they could maybe do second degree murder. I'm not sure. It'll be very interesting when we get close to that part. I suspect this trial is going to wrap up on Wednesday or Thursday. So hopefully we'll get to actually have the verdict by Friday. And if you missed the beginning of it, when we were talking about the celebration of life and she wanted to be cremated, they own a, I'm not sure what they're calling it. I think it was a double wide is what they're calling it. But in Key West, you don't know what that means. It means it's a little trailer that's probably worth like $2 million, because that's Key West for you. But she wanted to have her ashes scattered there. So they're actually doing that this summer. They already like set a schedule, and they know when they're going to go and do this. It'll be interesting if that changes. Like if Collin goes to prison, I don't know if that would change things for them, if they would still do that. And I also kind of want to know, even if he didn't go to prison, would he be going with them? Or, I don't know. He has had no emotions. We haven't heard anything about them loving each other as family or anything. And no emotions, no sorrow. So maybe he wouldn't go, because maybe he isn't sorry and he doesn't care. At least he's not directly behind this. Oh, I'm saying it, and he moved forward. But he's been showing himself a little bit more today than the other days. I wonder if he's just more comfortable. I will give him a bonus point. He has not been looking at the jury, and there's been so many trials of people staring the jury down, and it makes them really uncomfortable, and they start being like, something's off, something's weird, and they don't like it. So I think he's doing a good job of kind of keeping in his own little bubble and, you know, not doing anything erratic and not making people feel uncomfortable. This is a very long sidebar. Let's see if there's anything else I missed. So all of Catherine's siblings don't like her. The mom is the only one who really tried with her, but she didn't even try all the time because she struggled with her. I still can't get over that they both were Baker Act and she had a gun. And it was never taken away. Even with all of these things, it was never taken away. That does not make sense. And that is why we have these rules and laws set in place, because then something crazy happens if you don't do that. And it's just another scenario of someone dropping the ball when it comes to guns in the U.S. Looking over here and see if there's anything else I'm seeing that we haven't talked about yet. I was trying to figure out who Chuck is, because they were saying that Catherine and Chuck were together and she was pregnant when she was 13, but they made it seem like Chuck was a lot older. So now I'm like trying very hard to find him. I want to know what the age difference is. If he was a lot older, why didn't the parents have him arrested? That will be a whole nother thing. And that's what I was saying earlier. I'm like, I wonder if she was always like this and had this erratic bad behavior, or if major trauma happened at some point and she just went haywire. But I would have to believe that if she was 13 and got pregnant and this guy was significantly older than her, the parents are supposed to put him in jail. Like, you do something about it. You don't just like, oh, that's okay. But who knows? This family definitely has issues, and we're not even be able to get into all of it, but I'm sure they all have some problems. The grandma also brought up the fact that Catherine had bought Collin a car, but in one of their disputes and him not wanting to be there anymore, she sold it because she's like, I got it for him, but no, I'm not letting him keep it. He's misbehaving. He doesn't deserve it. And the grandma tried to fight her on it and say, no, it's his car. I mean, I don't know. I feel like if I bought a car for my daughter to use and we could call it her car, but if I'm the one who paid all the money and is paying for the insurance, she doesn't have a job, I'm doing it all. No, I feel like I could sell it if I wanted to. It's not really their car. You're doing it to be nice. But the grandma had a big problem with that. I'm muting myself.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Detman, we're almost done, all right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Detman, is it a fair statement that Kathy had expressed to you that she was getting very frustrated with the fact that your grandson wouldn't do his chores, was disrespectful, and was basically just taking his mom for granted?
Yes.
And when Kathy was communicating with you on September 7th and September 8th, that was the Saturday and the Sunday, she did so by both text messages as well as phone calls, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Kathy made it clear that she wanted your grandson home by 10 a.m. on Sunday, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then when that didn't happen, when 10 a.m. came and went, she still made it clear that she wanted your grandson to come home, correct?
Yes.
And Kathy mentioned that she wanted him home. She wanted him to go get work at Domino's from like 4 or 4:30 to 8 or 8:30 on Sunday, correct?
Yes.
And your grandson was working at Domino's, correct?
Yes, he was.
And so Kathy wanted him home so he could then go to Domino's that night, correct?
Yes.
And then kind of towards the end of the communications, then Kathy told you she was going to your house to get Collin to come home, correct?
Yes.
And she told you that either he could go home with her or he could drive, basically follow her in his car, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your time today, Ms. Dedman.
Thank you.
Regret?
I have no regret.
Is the witness released?
Yes, sir.
Is Mr. Levine, is she released?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other witnesses or other evidence you wish to present?
No, sir. Defense
Regret?
rests.
Will there be any rebuttal, Mr. Levine?
Whoa.
No, Your Honor.
They're resting right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, both parties have rested their cases. The next phase would be closing arguments, followed by your instructions on the law and then deliberations.
That
Closing
was
arguments in these
very
types
short.
of cases are typically not short. Also, I need to have a conference with the lawyers regarding the jury instructions, although it is up to me to decide what laws apply and how you should be instructed. They do have a right to give input. That conference could take some time. So if we did all of that in closing arguments, we would be sending you out probably mid to late afternoon, and I don't want to do that to you. So I'm going to give you an early day today, and we are going to work the rest of the afternoon to get all of those strings
That's
tied
crazy.
up so that tomorrow morning we'll begin directly with closing arguments, and then the instructions will already be finalized, and you will be probably going to deliberations around lunchtime, I would imagine. So you're going to have an early day. Now, although you have heard all of the evidence, actually I'm not quite sure about that. Give me just a moment. Would you approach just sidebar real quick?
So I just got done saying probably by Friday have a verdict. I changed my mind. I think we're going to have it tomorrow. Since they're ending this early to have a early day tomorrow morning, that means my Monica trial that comes on in an hour and a half, that will be 100% of my attention. There is another trial that is starting today, but it's only jury duty, or picking the jury, sorry. And so we will be watching that, but whenever that's done. So maybe tomorrow will be the official start date.
All rise, please.
And just a reminder, if you did watch Monica's trial with us, or if you're looking for another trial for this week, this whole week for her is going to be a very explosive testimony week. It's going to be crazy.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I did not ask you about whether or not you wanted to give testimony in this case, so I need to talk to you about that. I assume, based on your lawyer having rested, that you did not want to testify. Is that correct?
No, Your Honor.
That's not correct, or no, you did not want to testify?
I did not want to testify, Your Honor.
And have you talked about that with your lawyers today?
Yes.
Have you talked about it with them on more than one occasion?
Several, yes.
And did they answer any questions you had about whether or not you should testify and address any concerns you had about doing one thing or the other?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And do you need any more time with them before you answer my question in a few minutes about whether this is your final decision? Do you need any more time with them?
Take a minute.
All right. So he can, Mr. Larson, if he can take them to the jury room.
47, 41.
All right, I'm going to say one more thing before I exit out of here and get ready for the other one. But so last week we learned, well, and this weekend if you're playing catch up with me, we learned that a neighbor across the street had actually witnessed Collin grab his mom. They were standing outside at like a carport area. He grabbed his mom's back of the head, grabbed her hair, and dragged her inside. So she was like back to the ground, stomach to the air, dragged her in. That's huge, right? I mean, because there it is saying he didn't stab her, he didn't do any of that. She stabbed herself, but he was caught doing that. And then with the medical examiners all saying that there's no way that she did that, I do not think he's going to walk free of this. I don't know if they're going to push it to first degree because there's just so much abuse going to both people and even other people. But I don't think that the jury can just bypass all of those facts of her being dragged in and how she was stabbed and where. That's not possible. So that's my guess. He'll get something, but I don't know if they'll do first degree. If you have a prediction, let me know what you think. And if you think it would be first degree or would they knock it down, let me know your thoughts. I'm going to be back on here probably in a little bit. People have been coming back on these ones and leaving comments, so I will be checking out later when I get the Monica trial set up. So thank you for watching. I'm glad it was a quick, easy day, and we'll be back on for this tomorrow.